so different from the ways that he was spoken of in whispers at Lincoln University. In fact, I have not heard people speak of Du Bois with that type of passion and strength since that time. It's very interesting. I don't want to talk too long, so shut it down when you want to, Michelle. It's very interesting that these people who had suffered through McCarthyism and other crimes of the Cold War, who were not scholars but political activists, spoke of Du Bois in ways that I have not heard him spoken of since. I think Sophie and Michelle are absolutely right, that the present configuration of the American university and academic systems cannot tell the truth about Du Bois. They can't, because their principal commitment is not to the truth, as Du Bois was, but to maintaining the American empire, which means maintaining at home the system of racial hegemony. Now, they can put on an act. And of course, the university is a very sophisticated place, like the Catholic Church was during the Middle Ages. They got a lot of language that protects their image, the image of the university and the image of the individual professors. But they know it's a lie. And the lie is always in front of them, because the workers, mainly black here, are not paid enough, are exploited. It's almost a neo-slave system. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
A neo-slave system. And then, to add insult to injury, the gentrification of West Philly, the horrible and ruthless taking people's neighborhoods, which is their stories. I'm from North Philly. My neighborhood is being ruthlessly gentrified. So many of my neighbors have not survived, are dead because of this. And then, my friend Munchie and I, we were on our way over here, and we were looking at these wonderful buildings, but so much wealth. So all of this, these playing fields all around here, for so few people. So it is clear that the University of Pennsylvania is an enemy of the people. And as an enemy of the people, they're an enemy of Du Bois. And of course, to kind of make it appear that the University of Pennsylvania has reformed itself and wants to do right by Du Bois now when they did him so wrong. When he was here writing the foundational work in American urban empirical sociology. He could not live on this campus. But that did not deter him, of course. It was nothing that the white world ever did, and this is what it gets to something that I'm still trying to understand, his heroic character. No matter what they did, he persisted. And because the truth, as he says in the work Galileo Galilei, is greater than anything else, because the future of humanity rests upon the truth and its discovery. I'd like to just end here and say that, as I mentioned, I was pushed out of Temple. I was invited to Temple by the then chairman of the African American Studies Department. I was tenured at the University of the Sciences, and at the time he said, I want you to come here because I want you to bring the conferences and the studies of Du Bois that you had done. they didn't have Du Bois. And it was for obvious reasons. I mean, if you know anything about Black history, back in the 1920s, there was a struggle between the followers of Marcus Garvey and those of Du Bois. Marcus Garvey, and I say this without fear of successful contradiction, as Cecil B. Moore used to say. Marcus Garvey was a conservative nationalist. Most of his followers are reactionary nationalists. Most of those who wish to embrace what Garvey represented in the anti-colonial struggle and the anti-neo-colonial struggle come down inside of neo-colonialism and American imperialism. And all they want is a piece of the pie. So I was invited there, but certainly I didn't know that I was coming into a department. And the reason I'm talking about this and the departmental organization of the university. And African American Studies is now a part of the structure of the university with tenured professors and yada, 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 you know. I thought the purpose of African American Studies coming as it has out of the great struggle of Black people was to be that center of truth and critique of the dominant system. But I found out, no, it is a part of the dominant system. It wishes to be embraced by the dominant system. And that Du Bois is too radical, too revolutionary. And of course, Du Bois joined the Communist Party. And Du Bois was associated with Robeson. And so for a university professor to be associated with a revolutionary search for the truth, and for the truth in order to inform a larger fight to overturn the multiple systems of injustice. I think that Michelle, I think the Lotus Collective are absolutely right. That there's very little in terms of truth to be salvaged from these places we call universities. It is the struggle in the late Middle Ages where people were burned at the stake. No, they're not burning you at the stake, they just starve you out now. Don't let you work. There are people whose names are seldom mentioned. There's one that I am two that I'm particularly impressed with. Giordano Bruno, who stood for the truth even if it meant his life. And Thomas Munzer, the German priest who led a peasant uprising because the church and its dogma existed to keep the people enslaved. Enslave the mind, the body will follow. My last point is, this is why this is so important. The struggle of ideas. Nothing is more powerful than an idea has come, than an idea whose time has come for giving. And Du Bois' day is marching on. And if he liberates young people, Du Bois has a future, and we have a future.
Thank you, Dr. Monteiro. And finally, Caleb.
What is the metric against which our lives should be measured? Is it against the wealth we've created for ourselves, the prestige of our career following graduation? Perhaps it lies in artistic acclaim, in the music, films, and paintings we create for ourselves and for others. Or maybe the political groups we join to produce social change. More importantly, it could perhaps reside in the number of people we've helped. Each addresses the question above, but none reaches a definite answer. Answering this question is no small task, though. This is an immensely difficult question to truly confront and fully understand its implications for our own lives. It's a question that comes out of a deep desire to lead a meaningful life by committing to a cause beyond ourselves. So much of our time here at Penn is defined by an existential malaise, by a seemingly interminable fatigue arising from the lack of clarity in what direction we should take within our own lives. There are countless ways to distract ourselves from this question. We find this in our classes, clubs, internships, research, fraternities, and whatever else we choose to throw ourselves into. Although these avenues offer us some semblance of direction, we are still unable to understand how to lead lives that are significant, lives that are meaningful to those beyond ourselves. The choices we make at each turn in our life are meant to address this question, and underlying each of our choices is a moral character that shapes the arc of our lives. Will we choose to struggle with all humanity for freedom, peace, and justice? Or will we reject it to instead turn inwards, towards our own reckless self-advancement? Whatever you call it, be it meaning, purpose, goal, or a higher calling, they all fall under the same search for truth, a truth that serves as a grounding principle through which our lives can be built upon. But what is this truth and what must it mean to us? Today, we're presented with several concurrent understandings of what the truth actually is. It's immutable facts about the world surrounding us, facts that exist outside of ourselves. It's also the static, logical state of some object or condition. Common to such conceptions, truth is necessarily objective. It thus misses all the richness of truth, its moral and human dimensions. And it is this understanding of truth that we inherit from Du Bois's legacy. His understanding of truth was not outlined by a single paper or book, but elaborated within the entire arc of his life. Du Bois's life was a life committed to truth. If we are to fully understand the truth as Du Bois saw it, we must also understand the forces opposed to it. The common understanding of truth's opposite is falsehood. Then there are those who would alter this conception, to call ignorance the inverse of truth. Neither, I have come to believe, comes near the damnation that is the absence of truth, that is, fear. A deep, abiding cowardice suffocating you, one which makes you abandon your own conviction and stops you from saying what must be said. In spite of fear, you must commit to truth in the face of all those who would accuse you of being a liar, a deceiver, of being yet another peddler of dangerous falsehoods. If no one is willing or capable of saying the truth, then it simply withers away. Du Bois saw and comprehended such fear, but did not submit himself to it. Truth had given him this grounding principle from which he derived the motivation to venture on in his pursuits for justice and peace. Du Bois's life was a life led as an authentic, politically fiery and creative intellectual, one who was endlessly committed to the fight for freedom and peace for all humanity. A life led not for his own advancement, but in selfless deference to the immense responsibility he had as an intellectual to produce works that establish truths, no matter the ostracization and vicious attacks he endured. And how did Du Bois arrive upon this truth? Through art and science, not as separable domains, but as one and the same. What unites art and science, of which Du Bois fully understood, lies not in their difference of aesthetic or methodology, but in their relentless pursuit of truth. That there are intimate bonds between art and science, both being human endeavors grappling with the complexities of our humanity and the potentials for transforming our world. Science has the uncovering of knowledge in service of humanity, which reveals truth. And for art, how do we see the truth it represents? It's an ineffable truth, one inexpressible through concrete statements or arguments. Is truth not found in the rich undertones of Eric Dolphy's bass clarinet, in the vulnerable soul of Nina Simone's voice, in the expressive glow of Sun Ra's orchestra, in the wondrous emotional depths of Baldwin's prose? This is truth, an unshakable, unwavering, foundational truth of our humanity. To only intellectualize truth is also to miss its many dimensions. Du Bois himself embodied completely the role of both an artist and scientist. He devoted himself to ambitious scientific projects in search of truths embedded within American society and history. He was a rigorous yet lively scholar, writing vibrant prose that laid bare the revolutionary potentials of Black Reconstruction. And yet, even with his academic preoccupations, Du Bois still found in his own time, to pursue the creation of art. Art not for its own sake, but art that teemed with boundless truth. Art embedded in the visual charts depicting the exploitation and persecution faced by the Black community in Philadelphia, powerfully inscribed within vivid graphs and maps. Art found in his fictional writings that imagined a world joined in solidarity and brotherhood, not war. A world that would in time strive towards a positive peace. Let us again return to the question posed at the beginning. What is the metric against which our lives should be measured? I believe it's an uncompromising search for truth, that we can find something beyond our own individual aspirations. How can we then carry forward Du Bois's understanding of truth? What does this truth mean for us today? The usual answer now is political action. There is a fervent desire today among activists to earnestly carry out protests and demonstrations, actions that will hopefully radically change the unjust state of the world. People want change, and so we believe that it is on us to advocate for it. There is a reason so many young people today are turning towards movements that provide a purpose beyond themselves. When I was invested in labor organizing, I saw glimpses of a more expansive truth, though still partially obscured. When organizing meetings with workers and students to discuss our goals as an organization, what moved me was not the demands for change or even seeing students willing to fight for injustice. What I saw were meetings brimming with humanity. Workers and students laughing, eating, and chatting, not as workers and students, but as humans, united within a deeper struggle. It was in these meetings that we could all imagine a world stripped of its exploitation, senseless violence, and alienation. We think of political action as being visible, but I don't believe that's at all right. Though while I was in labor organizing, we did indeed plan protests, organizational meetings, and flyering campaigns. But it wasn't the actions themselves that meant something, but the relationships. Politics is more than just visibility and the people we can rally to our protests. We can and should not measure social change by how disruptive or widely shared our movements are. This is misguided, identifying political change only by the visibility of our actions. I believe the development of transformative relationships, of relationships that mean something beyond just enjoying each other's company, where a working partnership is itself political action founded within truth. Relationships committed to collective ideological struggle and moral transformation. Relationships built on challenging and taking responsibility for one another. Relationships built on a principle of unity. Much of my thoughts here in this speech are the collective synthesis of many past conversations with members in Lotus and in the Free School. And I owe much of what I know today to my close friends and mentors from both. It's in these relationships that I find truth. And it's in these transformative relationships that we see the horizon of a transformed society. Political action today must be driven by truth, not to be swept by a sense of catastrophic urgency. Transforming the world will take patience to see the truth, that in the work we're doing, we can and will be able to aspire to a more human world, free of exploitation. It is with others within a collective that we all become someone. What is the work that must be done in our time to reach such a world? To take even a wider vantage point, truth is also the consciousness of history, of understanding and embodying the movements in the past that task us today with continuing the fight for peace, justice, and freedom. As Michelle mentioned, Lotus Collective is not simply reading just for the sake of reading, or reading so that the ideas we manage to extract will then allow us to develop sufficient strategies to employ within action. History is still ongoing, and we are inextricably caught within it. We either recognize that or choose to ignore it, confining it only to the distant past. History tasks us with fulfilling the struggle of past generations, so that we may pave a better future for the generations that follow. A promise which we are bound to through our commitments to freedom. We are tasked with history, not just simply to understand, to read, and to recognize, but to commit. To commit to the ideas of past movements and monumental intellectuals like Du Bois, King, and Baldwin. To realize that our struggles are not disconnected from the past, but still furthering the cause of freedom today. The Black freedom movement is yet unfinished, and it is on us to understand history and to embody it. But even more fundamentally, our commitment to revolution must be drawn not from anger, hatred, or arrogance, but love. Love in the expansive sense, not just as a fleeting feeling of attraction, but a deep, raw, vibrant, difficult, but ultimately strong commitment we make, not only to ourselves, but to another, but to all the world. Love, not just in the simple sense of care for another or a chemical emotion, but willingness to take responsibility for the suffering masses and to struggle with them. A universal, boundless love that encompasses all of humanity, a selfless conviction that love is strength, not weakness, that love is truly revolutionary. This love, I believe, should form the basis for any revolution. That to love is to give yourself so wholly to something, to transform ourselves and all of society. That to love is to be free, to find freedom in each other within our shared struggle. To love is to see the depth of all humanity. In our pursuit for truth, we must be uncompromising in our vision for a better world. I often struggle with feeling overwhelmed, moved by the immensity of the work we're doing, but also grappling with my anxiety and doubt. Despite such feelings, there is no other path I would have taken. In the long, winding road, I see a world more beautiful and kind than the one we live in now. A world of moral leaders, a world present with justice, with peace and with the freedom for all people to explore and reach their human potential. This is the culmination of the moral choice in our times. We must choose to be fearless like Du Bois, fearless in our convictions and fearless in our love for all humanity, for a world that will become the beloved community.
Thank you to all of our panelists for speaking on the significance of Du Bois for our times. So, as I mentioned earlier in the framework, whether or not we're affiliated by Penn, we feel its profound influence on the city, on the world, and what is experienced by individuals at Penn serves as a mirror for what all people in the society experience. I'd like to ask the panelists why you all think so many people turn to the institution and institutions like Penn for moral and intellectual authority and validation. And also, what do you think Du Bois would make of our current institutions today and the institutions of his times? So whoever would like to answer this question, feel free to go ahead.
Can you say it again?
Yes, could you, I was going to ask that you just summarize the question.
Okay. So why do you believe that so many people turn to institutions like Penn for authority and validation? Additionally, what do you believe that Du Bois would make of the institutions of the past and of today?
Do you mind if I just say something about that? I'll be very brief. I think, again, that's a great question. I think because the question is about authority, legitimacy, and I guess to a certain extent privilege. Why do people turn to Penn? People turn to Penn for the same reasons that people in the Middle Ages looked to the aristocracy and the church as the legitimate sources of knowledge and truth. That is what we are taught and then the next, I would say the next issue is, what is the option? If it is not Penn, then what? If it is not the establishment, then what? And I think, like Caleb and you and Sophie have said, if it is not this, then it is the people. And if it is the people, then it is radical change of the society as a whole. I mean, if it is not Penn, then the question arises. Why does Penn have all of this property, all of these buildings, all of this wealth in the poorest nation, one of the poorest cities in the nation? How do you justify this? So I would say the choice is either the institutions of power and authority or the people. And if it is the people, then it is I would call it, I guess like my friend Yvonne of the Black Panthers would say, like they said, it is the revolutionary future of humanity. I think we are at that point, and that is the choice that we face.
We look towards man connection with the Bible, with the Bible? Is there a prophecy that could encompass what we're talking about here?
So interesting.
Anyone can answer that.
You know, it's Du Bois is one of the most interesting thinkers. In The Souls of Black Folk, maybe his best known book, there's a chapter entitled Of the Faith of the Fathers. And it is his early exploration, second to what he did in the Philadelphia Negro, of black religious and spiritual life. One of the things he said there, he said that on these shores, for the African, the church predates the black family. This is a very interesting kind of understanding of us, we black folk. The church predates the black family. So before we had families, we had the church. And in a lot of ways, it's almost like that today. The attacks upon our families through poverty and mass incarceration and gentrification, but we still have the church. We still have our spiritual values. To me, yes, Du Bois saw the Bible and read the Bible, especially the New Testament, in a very specific and unique way. Almost like Martin Luther King read the Bible. Because you could read the Bible through white eyes and white supremacy, which argued in some ways, or was used to argue, that black people were inherently inferior, and so on. Or you could read it like Du Bois read it, that the Bible gave justification to what he called, and what Martin Luther King would call, an inherent movement of black people towards communism, a communistic society. And he says that there is something in us that predisposes us away from the rank individualism of white America and towards a more collective life. And then, of course, as King would extend that notion, King said that the foundation of black religious life is the concept of love, agape, a love that transcends the individual and that becomes the most secure basis for human community. So Du Bois read the Bible. He wrote in many ways in the language of the New Testament, the poetry of the New Testament, but his understanding of the Bible was not as a justification for capitalism and white supremacy, but its opposite. And therefore, this is what Michelle was saying, the going to the people. How did black people interpret the Bible? And it was that interpretation that Du Bois, that became Du Bois's way of interpreting and using the Bible for the purpose of liberation.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak to the question?
I don't have an answer to that.
The question of institution.
Sure. So for the first part, why do people turn to institutions like Penn? I think that Penn has done a really great job of obscuring its purpose. It proclaims itself as a center of knowledge and human achievement. Meanwhile, like Doc mentioned before, its brutal gentrification of Black Philadelphia Du Bois would see the same evil in Penn today as he saw when he was here. See the same forces of greed and racial discrimination and a carelessness and hatred for humanity, though it might be more subtle today to our eyes.
So you said the carelessness, how did you formulate that? You said the carelessness of, I couldn't hear the
The carelessness and hatred for humanity.
That's very interesting. The carelessness, I hadn't thought of that. I think that, if you don't mind me saying, that notion of carelessness in their treatment of ordinary people, let them die. You know, I think I would like to I wanted to have, that's so striking.
Maybe I can offer a little different perspective. Try to avoid the trap of being an apologist for the university that pays my salary. Which I will acknowledge is more than it should be relative to other folks who make this place work. But also, like, Du Bois used Penn. He used Penn to get out of Wilberforce College, which was an evangelical school, so I don't know really as much about his take on religion, but he didn't much like the praying every day and the sort of the structure of that. So Du Bois used it. He used it to publish, a study, and then he went to Atlanta University. And I think sort of one of the questions is, how I think you can still see, all right, here you folks are using Cornell or Penn or Temple to find really awesome people and to offer a critique within the institution. So I think he would be in this space. He would be in this space here with us.